I'm Samantha Wright, 26 now, but was just 17 when my parents threw me out, claiming I'd come crawling back within a month. My mother's smirk and father's slamming door are seared in my memory. They were so certain I'd fail without them. Instead, I built a life they could only dream about. Now my phone's lighting up with their calls 9 years later. Funny how tables turn when you least expect it. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch. Trust me, this story might just give you the courage you need. I grew up in Oak Ridge, a picture-perfect suburb in Michigan, where every house looked almost identical. White picket fences, neatly trimmed lawns, and families that seemed perfect from the outside. My parents, Richard and Diana Wright, were respected members of the community. My father worked as an engineering manager at a local manufacturing company, having previously served 15 years in the Army. My mother was a high school English teacher, known for her strict grading and uncompromising standards. From my earliest memories, there were rules for everything in our house. Breakfast at 6:30 sharp, bed made with hospital corners, homework completed immediately after school, piano practice for exactly 60 minutes daily. Any deviation was met with consequences. My father believed military discipline shaped character. My mother believed academic excellence was the only path to success. Samantha, mediocrity is for people without ambition, my mother would say whenever I brought home anything less than an A. Even an A- would earn me a disappointed look and extra study hours. My father was more direct in his approach. In this house, we don't make excuses, we make results, he would say, his voice never raising but carrying the weight of command nonetheless. His military background influenced everything from how we folded laundry to how we responded to questions. Yes, sir, and no, sir, were the expected replies. Despite their strictness, I excelled academically. By middle school, I was taking advanced classes and winning academic competitions. But while my parents celebrated these achievements, they viewed them not as exceptional, but expected. There was always the next goal, the next benchmark to reach. What they couldn't understand was my passion for art and literature that went beyond my mother's approved reading list. I would hide novels under my mattress and sketch in notebooks I kept at school. My dream was to study creative writing and illustration to tell stories through words and images. But whenever I mentioned this interest, my parents dismissed it immediately. Art is a hobby, not a career, my mother would say dismissively. You need to focus on sciences if you want to get into a good pre-med program. The summer before high school, I made my first small rebellion. I signed up for an art class at the community center, instead of the SAT prep course my parents had selected. When they discovered this deception, my father took away my sketchbooks for a month. My mother added 2 hours of science reading to my daily schedule. This childish phase will pass, she told me. You'll thank us later when you're a successful doctor. High school brought new tensions. While I maintained a 4.0 GPA, I also found friends who shared my interest in art and literature. For the first time, I saw families where parents supported their children's diverse interests. My friend Jessica's parents attended her photography exhibitions with genuine pride. My lab partner, Michael's father, helped him build a darkroom in their basement, despite Michael being on a pre-med track. The contrast was stark and painful. There was one bright memory from my childhood that seemed at odds with the rest. When I was 9, I had written a short story and illustrated it myself. My mother found it while cleaning my room, and instead of the expected criticism, she showed it to my father. That evening, they took me out for ice cream and told me they were proud of my creativity. My father even had the story framed. It hung in our hallway for years. But as I grew older and my interests solidified in directions they hadn't planned, that supportive moment seemed like it had happened to a different family. The framed story disappeared from the wall when I was 14, replaced by my science fair certificates. The tension escalated during my junior year, when college discussions began in earnest. My parents had my future mapped out pre-med at University of Michigan, then medical school followed by a prestigious residency. Meanwhile, I was secretly researching art schools and creative writing programs. I kept brochures hidden in my friend Jessica's house and used the school computers to explore scholarship opportunities. The final months of high school were a cold war in our home. My father implemented stricter curfews and monitoring of my activities. My mother began coincidentally showing up at school during lunch periods, when I typically met with my art teacher about portfolio development. They checked my computer history and monitored my phone calls. I felt like I was suffocating under their control, even as the countdown to graduation offered a faint promise of escape. What I didn't realize was that things would come to a breaking point long before graduation day arrived. The catalyst came during spring break of my senior year. I had been accepted to several colleges, including University of Michigan, which my parents had selected. But I had also secretly applied to Pratt Institute in New York, known for its excellent art and design programs. Against all odds, I had been accepted with a partial scholarship based on my portfolio, the one I had painstakingly assembled during lunch periods and at Jessica's house. The acceptance letter arrived at Jessica's address as I had arranged. When she handed it to me after school, I felt a surge of both elation and terror. This was my dream, but I knew sharing it would ignite a firestorm at home. For 3 days, I carried the letter in my backpack, taking it out only when alone to read the words again. "We are pleased to offer you admission to our Bachelor of Fine Arts program." Each reading strengthened my resolve. I deserved a chance to pursue my passion. I was 18, legally an adult, though still 17 for another month. On the fourth day, I decided to tell my parents. I chose the evening after dinner when we typically sat in the living room. My father would read his engineering journals while my mother graded papers. I cleared my throat and stood before them. "I need to talk to you both about college," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. My father lowered his journal slightly. My mother set her red pen down. "I've made a decision about my future," I continued. "I've been accepted to Pratt Institute for their fine arts program, and I'm going to accept their offer." The silence that followed was deafening. Then my mother laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Don't be ridiculous, Samantha. You're going to Michigan for pre-med, as we've discussed for years. This isn't up for debate." "I'm not asking for permission," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I'm informing you of my decision. Art and writing are what I love, what I'm good at. I've been accepted with a scholarship." My father set his journal down completely, now his face hardening. "How did you even apply without our knowledge or consent?" he demanded. "We've invested 18 years in raising you and giving you every advantage, and this is how you repay us, with deception. I had to be secretive because you never listen." My voice rose despite my attempts to stay calm. "You've never once asked what I want. It's always been about your plans for my life." My mother stood up, her face flushed. "We know what's best for you. This art school nonsense is a waste of your potential. Do you have any idea how competitive medical school admissions are? You need to be at a top university with the right pre-med program." "I don't want to be a doctor." I finally shouted the words I'd held back for years. "I've never wanted that. It's your dream, not mine." My father rose, now too, towering over me. "As long as you live under this roof, you will follow our rules and our guidance." "We are your parents." "Then maybe I shouldn't live under this roof anymore." I said, the words escaping before I could consider their weight. Something changed in my father's expression, then a coldness I hadn't seen before. "Is that your decision, to throw away everything we've built for you over some childish fantasy?" "Richard," my mother interjected, though not to defend me. "Perhaps Samantha needs to learn how the real world works. Perhaps she needs to see what life is like without our support." They exchanged a look, a silent communication built on years of marriage, and I suddenly felt ice in my veins. "You have a choice," my father said flatly. "Accept your place at Michigan as planned, or leave this house." I stood frozen, disbelieving. "You're giving me an ultimatum over which college I attend." "This isn't just about college," my mother said, her voice eerily calm now. "This is about respect, about the foundation of this family. You've been sneaking around lying to us. You've betrayed our trust." "I had to." "You never listen." Tears were threatening now, but I fought them back. "If you walk out that door, don't expect our financial support," my father continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "No tuition, no living expenses, nothing." "You'll be back," my mother added with a smirk that burned into my memory. "You'll be back begging in a month when you see how hard the real world is." Something inside me hardened then. Years of suppressed resentment crystallized into resolve. "I won't be back," I said, "and I won't beg." "You have 1 hour to pack your essential belongings," my father said, checking his watch as if timing a military operation. "Anything you can't carry can stay until you've come to your senses." I ran upstairs, tears finally breaking free once I was alone in my room. How could they do this? I was still technically a minor for another month. Didn't they love me at all? But among the shock and hurt, another emotion was taking hold: determination. I grabbed my largest backpack and a duffel bag. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop phone charger, the emergency cash I'd been saving from my part-time job at the local bookstore, about $600. I took my sketchbooks and art supplies, family photos, and the flash drive containing all my writing and artwork. Everything else I had to leave behind. When I came downstairs, my parents were waiting by the front door, united in their stance. I had hoped foolishly, perhaps, that they would relent, that they would choose me over their rigid expectations. They didn't. "When you're ready to apologize and accept our guidance, you can come home," my mother said, her voice artificially sweet, her eyes cold. "You'll be back," she repeated with that same smirk. "You'll be back begging in a month." My father opened the door. The spring evening air felt suddenly cold. "This is for your own good, Samantha," he said. "Sometimes lessons have to be learned the hard way." I walked past them, my belongings heavy on my shoulders, but not as heavy as the weight in my chest. As I reached the sidewalk, I heard the door slam behind me, the sound echoing with terrible finality. Standing alone on the street where I had grown up, I felt a wave of panic. Where would I go? How would I survive? For a moment, I considered turning back, apologizing, accepting their terms just to have a roof over my head. But then I remembered my mother's smirk, my father's cold dismissal, and something hardened inside me. I would not give them the satisfaction. I would not prove them right. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called Jessica. "Can I stay at your place tonight? I just got kicked out." The first night at Jessica's house, I barely slept. Her parents were shocked when I explained what had happened, but kindly set up an air mattress in her room. "You can stay as long as you need to," Jessica's mother said, though we both knew it couldn't be a permanent solution. In the morning, the reality of my situation hit me fully. I was effectively homeless with limited funds and no clear path forward. Jessica's parents suggested calling Child Protective Services since I was technically still a minor, but I refused. In just 4 weeks, I would be 18, and involving authorities might force a reconciliation I wasn't ready for. "I need to figure this out on my own," I insisted. "I need to prove I can do this." Jessica's father helped me make a budget with my savings. $600 wouldn't last long, even with the most frugal planning. I needed income fast. The bookstore where I worked part-time could only offer 20 hours per week. I took on a second job at a coffee shop nearby that needed morning help. Between the two, I could work 50 hours weekly while finishing my last months of high school. It was exhausting, but necessary. Finding a place to live proved more challenging. No one wanted to rent to a 17-year-old with limited credit history and income. After 2 weeks at Jessica's, I found a room to rent in an elderly woman's house. Mrs. Patel was 82 and needed help with household chores in exchange for reduced rent. The arrangement was perfect for my situation, though my room was little more than a converted sunroom with a pull-out couch. "Young people should follow their dreams," Mrs. Patel told me after hearing my story. "My son wanted to be a doctor, and we supported him. Now my daughter wants to be a dancer, and we support her too. Parents should lift their children up, not hold them down." Her words were both comforting and painful, highlighting what I had never received from my own parents. Those first months were brutally difficult. I would wake at 4:30 to work the opening shift at the coffee shop, attend school from 8 to 3, work at the bookstore until 9, then return to Mrs. Patel's to study until midnight. Weekends were double shifts at both jobs. My grades slipped slightly, but remained strong enough to maintain my scholarship offer. The hardest part wasn't the physical exhaustion, but the emotional weight. Mother's Day came and went. My 18th birthday passed without acknowledgement from my parents. No card, no call. I checked my phone obsessively those first few months, both dreading and hoping for some contact. None came. Some nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. Other nights I was too exhausted to feel anything at all. Friends from school were supportive but couldn't truly understand my situation. Most were focused on prom graduation parties and dorm room decorations, while I was calculating whether I could afford both food and bus fare in the same week. My breaking point nearly came 3 months after being kicked out. My laptop essential for both school and my art portfolio died completely. The repair estimate was $400 I didn't have. Without it, my college plans might fall apart. I sat on the edge of Mrs. Patel's porch steps and finally let myself sob openly, feeling utterly defeated. That's when Linda, my manager at the bookstore, found me. She had come to drop off a schedule change and witnessed my breakdown. "Everything okay, Samantha?" she asked, sitting beside me. The whole story poured out between sobs. My parents, the ultimatum, the struggle to survive while finishing school, and now this latest setback. Linda listened quietly, then surprised me with her response. "I've been watching you work yourself to exhaustion for months without complaint," she said. "That kind of determination deserves support. The bookstore has an old laptop in the office we don't use anymore. It's yours if you want it." That simple act of kindness became a turning point. The laptop wasn't new or fancy, but it worked. More importantly, someone had recognized my effort and chosen to help without conditions. Linda became more than a boss over the following months. She adjusted my schedule to allow more study time, recommended me for a scholarship from the local business association, and introduced me to her brother, who taught art at the community college. He reviewed my portfolio and offered valuable feedback for strengthening my application to Pratt. "You've got raw talent," he told me. "With proper training, you could really make something of yourself in this field." Those words, so different from my parents' dismissals, fueled me through the darkest days. Graduation came with mixed emotions. I had no family in the audience when I received my diploma. But Jessica, Mrs. Patel, Linda, and several other supportive figures from my new life were there cheering loudly when my name was called. Their presence reminded me that family isn't always blood. As I finished my first year of independence, I was still struggling but surviving. The month my mother had predicted had come and gone. I hadn't begged to return. I hadn't crawled back. Despite everything, I was still standing still, moving forward and beginning to build a life on my own terms. The summer after graduation brought new challenges and opportunities. I had been accepted to Pratt with a partial scholarship, but even with financial aid, the costs were daunting. New York living expenses alone seemed impossible on my current income. After much deliberation, I made a difficult decision. I would defer my admission for 1 year to save money and better prepare financially. It wasn't what I had dreamed, but it was realistic. Pratt agreed to hold my scholarship, and I committed to making the most of this unexpected gap year. I enrolled in the local community college for basic courses that would transfer English composition, art history, and introductory design. The tuition was manageable with my jobs, and I could continue living at Mrs. Patel's house. "Smart choice," Linda told me when I shared my plan. "New York isn't going anywhere, and you'll be better positioned to succeed when you get there." My job at the bookstore evolved when Linda promoted me to assistant manager. The pay increase was modest but significant for my situation. I reduced my coffee shop hours, but kept the early morning shifts for the extra income. With Linda's encouragement, I began displaying some of my artwork in the bookstore's community space. To my surprise, I sold several pieces to customers, earning both extra money and confidence in my abilities. New friendships developed during this time, particularly with Zoe, a graphic design major at the community college. Unlike my high school friends who were scattered across different universities, Zoe understood the challenges of pursuing a creative career. "My parents weren't thrilled about art school either," she confided during a late-night study session. "But they didn't kick me out. I can't imagine facing what you've dealt with." "Sometimes I can't believe it either," I admitted. "There are days I still expect to wake up in my old bedroom, with all of this being just a bad dream." Zoe became a crucial part of my support system, pushing me artistically and reminding me of my worth when self-doubt crept in. We collaborated on small freelance projects, building our portfolios while earning extra income. My living situation improved when Mrs. Patel offered to convert her rarely used dining room into a proper bedroom for me. "I enjoy having you here," she said. "You remind me of my granddaughter, and the house feels less empty with you around." The new space allowed room for a small desk where I could work on art projects, a luxury I hadn't had in the sunroom. As months passed, I established routines and stability. I opened my first independent bank account, built emergency savings, and even began researching studio apartments in New York for the following year. There were still difficult moments. Thanksgiving arrived with an invitation from Jessica to join her family, highlighting the absence of my own parents. Christmas brought similar pangs of loss when Mrs. Patel's family gathered, welcoming me warmly but unavoidably reminding me of what I had lost. Occasionally, extended family members would reach out. My mother's sister called once awkwardly, suggesting a reconciliation. "They miss you, Samantha," Aunt Karen said hesitantly. "They just don't know how to reach out after everything that's happened." "They know my number," I replied more coldly than intended. "They knew where I worked. They could have contacted me any time in the past year if they wanted to." "Pride is a powerful thing," she sighed. "On both sides." I ended the call politely but firmly. Yes, I had pride, but I also had boundaries. Any reconciliation would need to begin with their acknowledgement of how deeply they had hurt me. Other relatives made similar attempts over the months. Each time I maintained the same position. I wasn't cutting my parents off permanently, but I wouldn't pretend their actions hadn't damaged our relationship beyond simple forgiveness. By the end of my gap year, I had accomplished more than just financial preparation. I had completed 12 transferable college credits with a 4.0 GPA. I had built a stronger portfolio. I had saved nearly $12,000 for my move to New York. And most importantly, I had proven to myself that I could succeed independently. The day I received my associate degree from the community college marked another milestone without my parents. 2 years had passed since they had thrown me out. In that time, I had never returned to their house, never asked for help, never begged as my mother had predicted. Their absence at the small graduation ceremony still hurt, but the pain had dulled with time and perspective. As I prepared for my transfer to Pratt, I felt both nervous anticipation and quiet confidence. The path had been harder and longer than I had imagined that night, standing on the sidewalk with my hastily packed bags, but I had walked it successfully. Now, I was ready to take the next step toward the future I had chosen for myself. New York was everything and nothing like I had imagined. The city overwhelmed with its noise pace and endless energy. My tiny shared apartment in Brooklyn was a far cry from my childhood suburban home, but it represented freedom and possibility in ways my old bedroom never had. Starting at Pratt was both exhilarating and intimidating. Many of my classmates came from privileged backgrounds, with parents who had supported their artistic pursuits from childhood. The disparity in our experiences sometimes left me feeling like an imposter, wondering if I truly belonged among them. During orientation, a professor asked each student to share who had inspired their artistic journey. While others named parents, teachers, or famous artists, I hesitated before answering truthfully. "Necessity," I said finally. "Art became my way of claiming something that couldn't be taken away from me." The professor nodded thoughtfully.
Some of the most powerful creative voices emerge from constraint rather than privilege, she observed. Your perspective is valuable here. Those words stayed with me, helping me recognize that my different path wasn't a disadvantage, but potentially a source of unique strength in my work. Academically, I thrived in the structured yet creative environment. My community college preparation had given me a solid foundation, and my determination to succeed after sacrificing so much drove me to excel. By the end of my first semester, my professors were taking notice of both my technical skills and the emotional depth in my work. Financially, life remained challenging. Even with my savings and scholarship, I needed to work part-time at a campus cafe and take freelance illustration jobs to make ends meet. Sleep became a luxury as I balanced academics work and building a professional portfolio. My roommate Tara, a film student from California, marveled at my schedule.
"How do you function on 4 hours of sleep?" she asked one morning as I returned from an overnight shift to change for class. When failure isn't an option, you find a way, I replied, too tired for anything but honesty. Tara's parents called her weekly and sent care packages monthly. She never flaunted this support, but its absence in my life remained a quiet ache I carried silently. During my second year at Pratt, I secured an internship at a small publishing house, specializing in illustrated books. The position was unpaid, adding more pressure to my already stretched schedule, but the professional experience proved invaluable. My supervisor, Eleanor, quickly became a mentor, recognizing potential in my illustrations that I hadn't seen myself. "You have a distinctive voice in your work," she told me during a portfolio review. "There's an authenticity many young artists take years to develop."
Under Eleanor's guidance, I contributed to several children's books and was eventually offered a paid position as a junior illustrator working remotely between classes. This opportunity allowed me to cut back on cafe hours and focus more on building my career. By my third year, I had moved to a slightly better apartment with more reliable roommates and established a growing reputation in the illustration community. Small commissions became larger projects, and my financial situation slowly stabilized. I rarely spoke of my family background to new friends and colleagues. When asked about holidays or family visits, I deflected with vague references to complicated relationships or independent circumstances. The truth felt too heavy to share casually, too defining in ways I was trying to move beyond. One exception was Daniel, a graphic novelist I met through industry events, who gradually became more than a professional connection.
Our relationship developed slowly, built on shared creative passions and mutual respect. When I finally shared my full story with him after months of dating, his response was simple but profound. "They lost something precious when they made that choice," he said, holding my hand tightly. "And they don't even know the magnitude of what they threw away." With Daniel's encouragement, I began addressing the emotional wounds I had carefully avoided confronting. I started therapy reluctantly at first, then with growing appreciation for the perspective it provided. My therapist helped me understand that setting boundaries with my parents wasn't just about anger, but about protecting the life I had fought to build. "Forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation," she explained during one session. "You can release the anger without inviting the same people back into a position where they can hurt you again."
This framework helped me process my feelings without the guilt that had occasionally surfaced. I could acknowledge both the love I still felt for my parents and the harm they had caused without feeling obligated to reunite our broken family. As graduation approached, I achieved another milestone, purchasing my first home. It wasn't grand, just a small studio apartment in a less trendy borough, but it was mine, bought with my earnings and a first-time buyer's program. The day I signed the mortgage papers, I thought of my mother's prediction that I would fail without their support. The memory no longer stung as it once had. Instead, it fueled a quiet pride in how far I had come. My final project at Pratt won departmental recognition and led to job offers from 3 different publishing houses. I accepted a position as a staff illustrator at a respected company with a focus on young adult literature, a perfect fit for my style and interests.
The starting salary was modest by New York standards, but represented financial security I hadn't known since leaving home. At 26, 9 years after being kicked out, my life bore no resemblance to the failure my parents had predicted. I had a career I loved, a home I owned, meaningful relationships, and a sense of self-worth built on my own achievements rather than external validation. The journey had been harder than necessary, marked by struggles that proper parental support could have eased, but the strength I had developed along the way was undeniably mine. The first missed call came on a Tuesday morning in early spring. I was in a meeting with publishers discussing illustrations for an upcoming book series when my phone vibrated with a notification. Glancing down, I saw a name that made my heart stutter: Dad. 9 years of silence, and now suddenly contact. I turned my phone face down and refocused on the meeting, but my thoughts were scattered.
Why now? What could have prompted this after so many years? When I checked later, there was a voicemail. My father's voice sounding older, more hesitant than I remembered. "Samantha, it's your father. Well, we would appreciate if you'd call us back. It's important. Thank you. No apology. No acknowledgement of the years of silence. Just an expectation of response. I deleted the message without returning the call. 3 days later, my mother called. Then my father again. Then both repeatedly over the course of a week. I ignored each attempt, unsure what to make of this sudden communication barrage after years of nothing. The voicemails began to reveal more. Samantha, please call us. Your father is having health issues. Then, we've been trying to reach you. There are financial matters we need to discuss. And finally, we know we have no right to ask for your help, but we're in a difficult situation. The picture emerging was both surprising and somehow predictable. From snippets in their messages and a call from my aunt, I learned that my parents' circumstances had dramatically changed. My father had suffered a heart attack, followed by complications that left him unable to work. Medical bills had accumulated despite insurance. My mother had retired early to care for him further, reducing their income. The house I had grown up in was now at risk of foreclosure. In a twist of irony too perfect to ignore, they needed help from the daughter they had thrown away. I shared the situation with Daniel one evening as we sat on the small balcony of my apartment. I don't know how to feel about this, I admitted. Part of me wants to ignore them completely. Another part feels guilty for even considering that. Daniel considered before responding. What would bring you peace, not what you owe them or what others might expect, but what would allow you to move forward without regret? That question stayed with me for days as the calls continued. I discussed it in therapy, explored my conflicting emotions, and reflected on the person I wanted to be versus the hurt child still living within me. After 2 weeks of their persistent attempts to contact me, I decided to read the text messages they had sent, but still not respond. Their desperation was evident in the words, a strange mirror of my own desperate state when they had closed their door on me. Samantha, we understand if you hate us, but please, just call. We made terrible mistakes. We know that now. Your father's condition is worsening. If not for us, would you at least speak to him for his sake? We're about to lose the house. We don't know where we'll go. The parallels to my own situation at 17 were striking. Now they were the ones facing uncertainty about basic needs like housing and financial stability. Now they were the ones reaching out for help that might not come. I discussed the situation with my closest friends and with Mrs. Patel, who had remained a surrogate grandmother figure in my life. You don't owe them forgiveness or help, Zoe insisted. They abandoned you when you were practically still a child. Whatever you decide should be about your healing, not theirs, my therapist advised. Ask yourself what boundaries you need to maintain your own well-being if you do choose to respond. Mrs. Patel offered a different perspective. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, she said gently. I'm not saying to forget, but perhaps this is an opportunity to release some of the weight you've been carrying. After nearly a month of their calls, I finally made my decision. I would respond, but on my terms with clear boundaries. I composed a brief email rather than calling, allowing myself the emotional distance of written communication. I've received your messages. I'm willing to have a limited conversation about your situation. This does not mean I have forgotten or fully forgiven what happened. I will call this Sunday at 2 p.m. Their response was immediate and effusive with gratitude promises that they had changed, assurances that they had realized their terrible mistake years ago but hadn't known how to reach out. I read it once and didn't reply further. When Sunday arrived, I sat in my living room, phone in hand, Daniel nearby for moral support. At exactly 2, I made the call I had both dreaded and somehow been waiting 9 years for. My mother answered on the first ring. Samantha? Her voice cracked on my name. Thank you for calling. We weren't sure you would. I said I would, I replied, my tone neutral. Is Dad there too? Put me on speakerphone. There was rustling, then my father's voice weaker than I remembered. Samantha, it's good to hear your voice. For a moment, I was transported back to being 17 again, standing in their living room as they delivered their ultimatum. The memory threatened to overwhelm me, but I steadied myself, remembering I was no longer that vulnerable girl. I was a successful adult speaking to them by choice, not necessity. You've been trying very persistently to reach me, I said. I understand from your messages that you're facing health and financial difficulties. What followed was their explanation of circumstances delivered with uncharacteristic humility. My father's health crisis had begun 2 years earlier and progressively worsened. Medical bills had depleted their savings. My mother's early retirement reduced their pension benefits. The house was 3 months behind on payments. We've tried everything, my mother said, her voice strained. We've cut every expense sold what we could. Richard's medications alone are over $1,000 monthly after insurance. We understand we have no right to ask for your help, my father added, especially after how we treated you. But we didn't know where else to turn. I listened silently, noting how they skirted around directly acknowledging what they had done, framing it vaguely as how we treated you, rather than naming their actions. This evasion stirred my anger anew. Let me be clear, I said when they finished. 9 years ago, you threw your 17-year-old daughter out for wanting to study art instead of medicine. You said I would be back begging in a month. You offered no support, no guidance, not even a phone call on my 18th birthday. Do you acknowledge these facts? Silence stretched on the other end. Finally, my mother spoke. We were wrong. Terribly wrong. We thought we were teaching you a lesson that you'd come back quickly and accept our guidance. When you didn't return, pride kept us from reaching out, my father added. Then too much time passed, and we didn't know how to bridge that gap. It's the greatest regret of my life. It wasn't the full acknowledgement I wanted, still minimizing their actions as a lesson gone wrong, rather than the abandonment it was. But it was more than I had expected. I built a life without you, I said, keeping my voice steady. I worked multiple jobs while finishing high school. I put myself through college. I established a career. I bought a home. All things you could have been part of, should have been part of, but chose not to be. We know, my mother said, her voice thick with tears. We followed your career from afar. Your illustrations in those children's books. The award you received last year. We've been proud of you, even though we had no right to be. The revelation that they had tracked my accomplishments without ever reaching out until they needed something was another sting. But I hadn't made this call to reopen old wounds. I'm willing to help under certain conditions, I said. First, I won't give money directly to you. I'll pay specific bills like the mortgage or medical expenses directly to the providers. Second, this help comes with no strings. I'm not moving back. I'm not suddenly becoming the daughter you wanted instead of the one I am. Third, any future relationship will be rebuilt slowly on my terms, if at all. Of course, my father agreed quickly. Whatever terms you set, we're just grateful you're willing to speak with us at all. We arranged for me to review their financial documents and determine what assistance I could reasonably provide without compromising my own security. The call ended with awkward goodbyes loaded with unspoken emotions on all sides. After hanging up, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing what had just occurred. Daniel waited patiently before asking, "Are you okay?" "I don't know." I answered honestly, but I think I made the right decision. Not for them, but for me. I don't want to become someone who turns away when they could help, even if the people needing help once hurt me. That would make me too much like them. Over the next 2 months, I established a careful system for helping my parents while maintaining necessary boundaries. I arranged automatic payments for their mortgage and my father's primary medications. I consulted with a financial advisor about longer-term solutions for their situation, including a potential reverse mortgage or downsizing to a smaller home. Our communications remained formal and focused on practical matters. I avoided delving into emotional territory, unwilling to rush a reconciliation that required more time and evidence of genuine change on their part. My therapist supported this approach. "You're showing tremendous maturity by helping without compromising your boundaries," she noted. "Many people either cut contact completely or rush back into unhealthy patterns. You're creating a third path." 3 months after our initial phone conversation, I agreed to meet my parents in person. We arranged to meet at a restaurant halfway between New York and Michigan neutral territory that wouldn't trigger memories for any of us. Seeing them for the first time in 9 years was jarring. My father looked significantly older, thinner, with a cane he hadn't mentioned. My mother's hair had gone completely gray. They both seemed smaller, somehow diminished from the towering authorities of my childhood. The initial greeting was awkward, hesitant hugs and uncertain smiles. We ordered food that none of us ate, much of the conversation stilted and careful. They asked about my work, my apartment, carefully avoiding deeper topics until midway through the meal when my father cleared his throat. "Samantha," he began, his voice unsteady. "I've been thinking about what to say to you for years, imagining this moment. Now that it's here, words seem inadequate." I waited, unwilling to make this easier for him. What we did was wrong. Not just misguided or strict parenting. Wrong. He looked directly at me, something he hadn't done since we sat down. "We failed you completely. As parents, our job was to support and protect you, even if we disagreed with your choices. Instead, we abandoned you to prove a point." My mother reached across the table, not quite touching me, but extending her hand. "We've had years to reflect on our actions, to realize the damage we caused. There's no excuse, no justification we can offer. All we can say is that we're deeply sorry and wish more than anything we could undo what we did." The acknowledgement, finally stated plainly without minimizing or justifying, loosened something tight within my chest. It didn't erase the past or heal all wounds, but it opened a door that had remained firmly shut. "I needed to hear that," I said quietly. "For years, I've wondered if you ever truly recognized the magnitude of what you did. Not just kicking me out, but the message it sent about your love being conditional on my obedience." "It was never about not loving you," my father insisted. "We loved you so much, we thought we knew what was best better than you could know yourself. That kind of love became a weapon without us realizing it." "And we were wrong about what was best," my mother added. "You've proven that beyond any doubt. Your success doing exactly what we forbade is perhaps the most fitting consequence of our mistake." We talked for hours, covering ground that had lain fallow for 9 years. They shared their gradual realization of their error, their pride as they secretly followed my career, their fear of rejection if they reached out without crisis forcing their hand. I shared select parts of my journey, carefully omitting the darkest moments, the nights of despair and doubt they had no right to know about yet. As we prepared to leave, my father asked hesitantly, "Where do we go from here?" "Slowly," I answered honestly. "I'm willing to continue communication. Phone calls, occasional visits. But trust takes time to rebuild, especially when it's been so thoroughly broken." "We understand," my mother said. "Whatever time and terms you need. We're just grateful for this chance." In the parking lot, as we said goodbye, I found myself able to hug them with slightly less reserve than when we'd met. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of a path towards something new, something that acknowledged both the past and the possibility of a different future. The drive back to New York gave me time to reflect on the day's events and the larger journey that had brought me to this point. 9 years ago, I had been forced into independence, prematurely thrown into adulthood without preparation or support. The path had been unnecessarily difficult, marked by hardships that proper parental support could have alleviated. Yet that same difficult path had forged a strength and resilience within me that I might never have discovered otherwise. I had built a life on my own terms, one that honored my authentic self rather than conforming to someone else's expectations. In trying to force me into their mold, my parents had inadvertently released me to find my own shape. As I drove through the gathering darkness toward the city I now called home, I realized that the most powerful lesson wasn't about my parents at all. It was about breaking cycles, about choosing a different way forward than the one modeled for me. I had learned that true strength sometimes means extending help to those who hurt you, not because they deserve it, but because compassion reflects who you choose to be, regardless of how others have treated you. In the end, the story wasn't about them begging me to pick up the phone. It was about who I had become in the silence between us, a woman capable of answering that call without losing herself in the process. I want to thank you all for listening to my story today. I'm curious to know if you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch or set boundaries with family members who hurt you. Drop a comment below sharing your experience or any thoughts this story brought up for you. If my journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through difficult circumstances. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this, share it with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our struggles makes all the difference. Remember, your worth isn't determined by those who failed to see it, but by the courage you find to keep moving forward.